Good morning and welcome to our program. I'm your host, Katie Jones, and today we will be doing some embossing. Now we're going to talk about our supplies. So our supplies for today, it should be popping up with a list, but basically you just want to have cardstock available, cardboard, anything will do. Honestly, when I did my example, I just used a box that I had from like a pack of potatoes in my pantry. You can do it with anything. And then an X-Acto knife, and then a mechanical pencil, painter's tape or masking tape, either is fine, a cutting mat, puffy paint or fabric paint, aluminum foil, and a canvas. And a lot of those supplies we can use in multiple ways. Throughout this time, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A section. And now we're going to get started. The first thing we're going to do is create a design on paper. So, use a piece of cardboard. I honestly just had a folder, and that will work just fine. It's just something to create a template out of. So, I'm going to cut it, and then I'll be able to use this to create my design.
Katie, we have our first question.
Okay, perfect. We have our first question from the audience.
And the question is, they're wondering what they can use if they don't have a cutting mat.
If they don't have a cutting mat, feel free to use like a piece of cardboard. It's just something to protect your workspace. So if you have that, a piece of wood will work just fine as well. So I have my piece of cardboard. That's going to be my template. And now I'm just going to create a design. Anything that you think would be nice for a card or a piece of paper. Mostly you see embossed cards, so it can be a message. I did mine, and it says shine. Hopefully you can see it. So you can create anything. Today I'm going to go a little bit simpler just for an example, but I'm going to draw it out. And maybe I'll make it say love. Block letters are easier. You don't want to get too complicated with it because you're going to have to cut it out and use that to be your example. So block letters are great. Calligraphy is possible, but I wouldn't say to try that on your first go around. And now I'm going to take my X-Acto knife and just cut out my design.
Katie, we got another question if you're ready.
Perfect. We have another question from the audience.
They're wondering if they don't have an X-Acto knife, could they use scissors or a different kind of knife?
Yes, if you do not have scissors, that's a great question. You can use, or if you don't have an X-Acto knife, you can use scissors. And you can also use a box cutter, anything to create your design. And what I love about this is that you can create templates and use them in the future. So you can always like save them. So I have my little heart. And now I'm going to cut out my letters. Now, if you're just getting started, you might want to keep your letters whole. And I'll show you on the O and the E, if they have cutouts. Sometimes that's a little bit tricky, but again, it's possible.
Katie, we have another question.
Perfect. We have another question from the audience.
And this is, how do you know if your X-Acto blade needs to be replaced?
Ooh, how do you know if your X-Acto knife blade needs to be replaced? I don't really have a schedule for mine. I just go until it's not really cutting as sharp or as precise. Sometimes if I use it for something messy and it gets paint on it, I'm not the neatest crafter, but that's okay. You can always replace it. I use blade size 7. There's a lot of different sizes and styles. I just like my plain X-Acto knife, but they have the kind that you can put your finger through, or there's some smaller blades that are nice if you're working with smaller materials. Obviously, if you're using tape or anything sticky, it'll probably need to be replaced, but I try and use mine as much as possible. And now I'm going to cut out my last little letter.
Katie, we have a follow-up question.
Ooh, we have a follow-up question.
Would the smaller blade size make it more possible to do finer cutouts and work?
Yes, if you use a smaller blade, you can certainly do smaller designs. The size 7 is what I use for pretty much anything. It's universal. But if you want to use the smaller blade, you might prefer it if you're just getting started in crafting. But again, I like this one because I can pretty much do anything with it. So I always keep one in my backpack or my little art supply bag. Okay, perfect. So I have my letters cut out, but you can see that there's like a hole in the middle of both. So we're going to cut it out. I'm going to show you how to do it. You don't have to do this your first round because, again, you don't want to bite off more than you can chew the first round. But I'm going to cut out the little hole in the ooh. Just be very careful with it. And when choosing cardboard, you don't want it to be too thick. It's just something that you're going to use to make a template. You don't want to use like a thick cardboard box because it's going to be really hard to cut out. And you really don't need that much relief when creating a card. That one's really tiny. The smaller blade might be better for this part. All right, perfect. So I have my little tiny cutouts. They're hard to see, but it does create a nice effect once you put it on the paper. So now we're ready. I'm going to use a piece of cardstock. So I have it, and I'm just going to fold it in half, just so I can figure out how to line it up a little bit nicer. And the cool thing about this, if you do a design and then you decide that it looks a little bare, you can always make another template and put it on there. So I'm going to line this up. It may not be perfect today, and that is a-okay. And I'm just going to use a piece of masking tape and stick it on. If you're wondering if you have Scotch tape at home, I wouldn't necessarily use it because sometimes, like, we're going to remove this, and sometimes when you go to remove it, it will not come off as nice as painters or masking tape. And you don't want to rip your paper. So what do I do with my little cutouts? You're going to take and just put them where they would naturally fall in your design and tape it down. You just want it to hold it in place so that you can see it when you trace it. And then you can barely see the little E cut out, but we'll put that one in. It really does make a big difference though. I tried it with and I tried it without, and I definitely prefer to have it there because it just looks nicer. And that one is so tiny. Might be easier to stick it to the tape and then line it up. Okay, so now you're ready. To trace it, I would recommend finding a window or a door, anywhere that you have a light source. You're going to take a couple pieces of tape just to hold it in place, and you're going to use a mechanical pencil and just roll the lead down or push the lead down. You only need the tip to trace it. So now we are ready, and we're going to go over to our handy dandy light source. I just literally stuck mine to my front door and traced it. Just makes it easier. And I did it backwards. You want to do it this way so that your template is facing the door. And now you're going to trace it. It's very important in this section to only trace the outside edge. And you'll see as I trace it, because otherwise the relief won't look the way that you designed it. So now we're just going to take and push along all of the edges.
Katie, we have another question.
I do it a couple times just to make sure it looks nice and neat. And then I'll do my letters. It's a great way just to make a cute little card. Looks really nice. If for some reason you're not able to get to the store, you can create a fun little message and create like a birthday card or a greeting card. Send it off. It looks really nice, but it's so simple. So with the letters that have little inserts or cutouts, just take and trace your outline and then trace the outline around the little cutout as well, because that will create the relief to show a little cutout, because you worked hard to get that little baby in there. Finishing up, so you trace that part. And when you do it, just put the paper at like a good eye level, maybe a little bit lower, because if you have a complicated design, you don't want to be standing there with your arms too high the whole time. It's not very comfortable. I'm just tracing over the ones with the cutouts really well. All right, so now that all of your design has been traced, you're ready to take it off, and you can return to your workspace. Just peel it off. And the great thing about this, you can emboss or you can deboss. So I think it's really cool because if I did it backwards, like I originally put it up there, you could create it so it's sunken into your design. I prefer the raised one on this, but you can do either. So now I'm just going to very gently peel the design off of my paper. It's okay, it ripped a little bit off my template, but that's okay.
Katie, we had a question come in while you were tracing.
Oh, perfect. We had a question come in. And what would that be?
You mentioned specifically to use a mechanical pencil, but if they don't have one, is a wooden standard pencil okay to use?
I wouldn't say that a wooden standard pencil would work as well, because basically you're just using it as like a stylus to trace it, and if you used a regular pencil, then you would be able to see it in your design, unless you're going to cover it with paper or something afterwards. You can use anything with like a little edge. Honestly, like a fork would probably work just fine if you just use one of the little prongs or anything of that nature. So I'm peeling it very carefully. Okay, perfect. It removed a little bit, but you can't really see it. And voila, so beautiful. So now you have a nice little greeting card. Hopefully you can see it. It says love. Oh, perfect. And you can see that my cutouts are visible. So I think that is the niftiest thing. Okay, so now we are going to emboss using foil. And there's a lot of different ways to do this, but I just chose this way. It's really simple, it's really easy. And basically, I'm going to take and create a design. I can design anything I want. Again, with embossing, if you're doing these simple, quick methods, don't get too complicated because it may not show up as you expect. So I'm just going to create a little design Might do like a sunshine. And I can put like a message beside it. And you can always, once you're done with this, mount it on a piece of mat board or frame it any way you want to display it in your home. You can put it up in an office. Any way works great. So I have my little design. That's great. I honestly, for this, just used the back of a box that I had gotten from Sam's Club and just cut it out. I cut it to size, and we're good to go. So now I'm going to use, I call it puffy paint, or you can also use fabric paint, and it kind of works either way. But I'm going to use this and trace out my whole design. And with this, I just try and keep a steady hand because I don't want to create any air bubbles.
Katie, we have a question from the audience.
Oh, perfect. We have another question.
Does the color of the paint matter?
Ooh, does the color of the paint matter? No. Honestly, for stuff like this, I tend to use my colors that aren't my favorite because I want to keep more of my colors that I like for other projects. But it doesn't matter. I just chose red for today. Honestly, red isn't my absolute favorite color, so that's why I picked it. So I'm going to go around my outline and just get all of your...
Katie, we have another paint question if you have time.
Ooh, yes, we have another paint question.
You had mentioned using puffy paint and fabric paint. Are those the only paints that can be used? Are there other ones?
Are there other paints that you can use? So there is like a medium, it's a gel medium that I use for acrylic piping. That would work because it creates that relief effect. I'm kind of winging it here and adding some designs if you're wondering. But those would work. The medium would work. It's more expensive, so I wouldn't really suggest it. But you can also, I've seen online that people use hot glue. I honestly tried it. It's harder to manage. And when I went to put my foil on, it kind of ripped it. You can use regular aluminum foil or craft foil. I used aluminum foil because I had it at home. But I found that it was ripping when I tried to put it over the hot glue because it was just a little bit too thick. So I like how this dries very neat and nice. You kind of know your results with it unless you get a crazy air bubble or something. But otherwise it's very predictable, which I enjoy. So I'm just going to trace my design.
Katie, we had a foil question come in.
Ooh, we have a foil question.
You mentioned using regular aluminum foil and craft foil. Does that include things like gold leaf?
Ooh, gold leaf. For this method, I would not. I like to save my gold foil leaf for something different. I like to put gold foil on a canvas once I've painted it or on different craft projects. But with this, I found that the aluminum foil kind of gives the emboss look that I'm going for. It's just a raised effect, so it makes it look very clean and smooth. So that's what I would suggest. Okay, so I have my design, and now I'm gonna let it dry. I let mine dry overnight. It might be done drying before then, especially if you do thinner lines, but I just let it dry overnight, and then it's pretty much ready. So this one's wet, but I did bring an example of one that's already dry. And now I'm just gonna take basic aluminum foil and get a piece that's big enough to cover the piece, but not too big. You just want to cover it and go over the edges. So give it a little bit, maybe about an inch of extra room. ready. With the aluminum foil, there's kind of a dull side and a shiny side. For a lot of the pieces that you see, traditional artwork, it's the shiny side. So I'm going to put that down and just kind of line it up. And I'm just going to cut it. Again, you don't want it to be too big of an overlap, but I'm happy with that. Kind of line it up. I kind of smush it down to get the initial relief. And I'm just going to fold it over. I like aluminum foil because it kind of stays in place as you work. And just fold all your edges in. Boom. Okay, so now I'm going to flip it over. You can't see any of it. So you're just going to take and rub the entire thing. You can see my design coming out. This is such a fun project for kids. It looks really nice. It's something that you can keep in your home forever. So easy. So I'm just pushing along all of my lines. Whoops. And then pushing along my text. Sorry about
Katie, we have
that.
a question from the audience.
Ooh, we have a question.
Do you have to use your finger to press in the foil, or can you use a tool of some kind, a pencil, an eraser, anything like that?
Can you use a tool? I wouldn't really use a pencil because that's going to create marks in the foil. Anything that has a smooth edge, I mean, could use an eraser. That works just fine. Creates a lot of eraser shavings, but if you don't like that noise, it kind of works. I just go for it and push it down with my fingers. But see, it creates those eraser shavings. But, I mean, it works. So, that's great. So I push it all down. It's almost ready. And then again, you can put it on a piece of mat board. You can put it in a frame. Anything to make it pop. If you put it against a piece of darker mat board, it would be beautiful. So it's ready. You can always take and tape the background down if you're happy with that. You can glue it if you want to. I'll tape mine just to make it stay a little bit better. And just be careful because you don't want it to overlap, so you might need to cut it or fold it back. You don't want your tricks coming out the back. It's just a little trick. Right. Boom. And voila. Done. Okay, so our last thing that we're going to do today would be embossing on a canvas. So today I'm just using a flat canvas. You can really use whatever canvas you want. You can use a stretched one or just a flat one. You can do it on a piece of cardboard even if you don't have canvas at home. I think the canvas looks really nice, but I'm going to show you how to do it. Again, puffy paint was my best friend with this project, so I just had some white puffy paint around the house and using that. And again, you can always create your design with this one. It's important to line it up correctly, so I might just freehand it. But with this, you are going to see it once you're done unless you spray paint it. So on mine, you can see I just did joy and did a little design on the edges. If you want to spray paint over it just to make it look nicer, or if your puffy paint doesn't match your canvas, that's a really good option. So I'm just going to take and create whatever message I want to. Let's see.
Katie, we have a canvas question.
Ooh, we have a canvas question.
What kind of canvas are you using? Does it matter the weight of the canvas?
Um, the question was about the weight of the canvas. For this one, it's one of the basic, like lower level ones. They have different levels of canvas, like the really nice oil canvases or the basic, like kids canvas. This is probably just a kids canvas. I had it just around, and it looks nice once it's done. I think a stretch canvas will give a really nice effect if you're putting it up in your home. And you can use a lower level one. It's really fine because you're not painting with oils on it. So I'm going to do my design. And I got a little bit right there.
Katie, we have another question about embossing in general.
Ooh, a general embossing question. What would that be?
You're going over 3 different kinds of embossing in this class. How many different ways of embossing are there?
How many different ways? I don't know an exact number for that. Embossing is just the technique of creating relief on a piece of material. So you can do it with a lot of different things. Honestly, you could call puffy paint on a shirt embossing because it's a raised relief. Or like I was saying, like debossing is just taking and having that sunken in effect. You can do it with regular metal or copper, anything that has a little bit of flexibility, or you can add something to the material like this to give it that effect, if that answers that question. So I think there's a lot of possibilities, which I enjoy. You can even use like hot glue on here and just spray paint it. People won't really know the difference if you're displaying it in your home. So you're welcome to do what you want with it.
Katie, we have a glue question.
Ooh, a glue question. Okay.
And that is, would a liquid kind of glue work for this?
Okay, so I did do that one time. I did this for a program a couple years ago. And when I was testing out different supplies and materials, I did initially want to use clear glue. And I tried it with a basic liquid craft glue. And I was not impressed. It dried really flat. With this one, I did want more of a raised edge versus with foil, I wanted it to be a little bit more flat. But with this one, I did want it to pop and be noticeable. And I was not super impressed. It's possible for little kids, but if you're doing this to display permanently in your home, I would not recommend it. So I'm almost done. And then again, just let it dry overnight. With this, if you have your red puffy paint and you only had one color, you could do it and then spray paint it, even take a basic acrylic and brush it on, use a sponge brush, and create it. So I'll let it dry overnight and then it'll be ready to display in my home. And with that, again, you can use a pencil, but and line it up. But just make sure you either cover your lines or paint it afterwards to give it a finished look. And again, put it on a piece of mat, put it in a frame, just finish it off, and you'll be ready to go. I hope that you all enjoyed your time with us today. We have a lot of virtual programs coming up, so be on the lookout and enjoy your day.